In 1989, Pepsi became the sixth largest military power in the world. Not in advertising, not in some metaphorical sense. We're talking about real warships, real submarines, real naval firepower, all owned, briefly, by a soft drink company. It's a moment in history so absurd most people still think it's fake, but it's not. And to understand how we got there, you have to go back to one of the strangest deals ever made during the Cold War. This is the story of how capitalism, communism, and cola collided. In the 70s, the world was divided between East and West, the United States versus the Soviet Union, Coca-Cola versus Pepsi. Coke had already conquered the American market, but Pepsi had a bigger dream, global ones. And they had their eyes on the one place Coke hadn't touched, the USSR. In 1972, President Richard Nixon visited Moscow to open talks with Soviet Premier Brezhnev. Behind the scenes of high-stakes diplomacy, Pepsi executives were also present. They saw a chance to do what no other American brand had done, get inside the Iron Curtain. And during that trip, they did it. A formal deal was signed. Pepsi would be the first US consumer product sold in the Soviet Union. It was a marketing coup, but there was one very big problem. The Soviet Union didn't deal in US dollars. Their currency, the ruble, wasn't convertible outside of the USSR, so they couldn't just wire Pepsi the money, but they could trade. In one of the oddest barter agreements of the modern era, the Soviets paid for Pepsi syrup with vodka, specifically stolichnaya. Pepsi would sell the vodka in the West and use that revenue to fund operations inside the USSR. It was weird, but it worked. Throughout the 70s and 80s, the Soviet people got access to their first American cola. Pepsi got exclusive distribution rights, millions in vodka sales, and footholds in over 20 Soviet bottling plants. By the mid-80s, Soviet citizens were drinking over 1 billion servings of Pepsi a year, but by 1989, the math stopped working. Stolichnaya wasn't cutting it anymore. Global vodka competition had driven prices down, and the Soviet economy was unraveling fast. Pepsi needed a new form of payment. And what the Soviets offered next shocked everyone. In 1989, to settle their debt, the Soviet Union offered Pepsi an entirely different product: warships. Specifically, 17 submarines, a cruiser, a destroyer, a frigate. In total, over $3 billion worth of military equipment. Pepsi accepted the deal, and for a brief period, the soda company owned more firepower than most countries on Earth, and for a brief moment, making them the sixth largest naval power. Within a few weeks to months, the ships were eventually sold to a Swedish scrap company for dismantling. Pepsi had no plans to sail them or to go to war with Coca-Cola, but that didn't matter. Over time, the story leaked, and the world couldn't believe what it was hearing. Of course, the headlines didn't disappoint. Pepsi now a naval superpower. Pepsi's fleet bigger than Sweden's. Capitalism just bought communism's ships. At the time, the Pepsi CEO even joked to the US National Security Advisor, "We're disarming the Soviet Union faster than you are." He wasn't entirely wrong. In a Cold War defined by ideological battles, this was something else. A soft drink company had brokered peace through business. And whether it was satire or strategy, Pepsi's move blurred the line between commerce and geopolitics. Coca-Cola had global dominance, but Pepsi had submarines. Pepsi wasn't just selling a drink, they were selling a message. American lifestyle, modern branding, a taste of the West. To many Soviet citizens, drinking Pepsi became a small act of rebellion or aspiration. It was the only American product you could find on store shelves, and it was marketed like a revolution. This wasn't just about profit, this was about cultural influence. Pepsi had achieved something governments struggled to do for decades. They infiltrated the Soviet psyche. But 2 years later, the empire that had traded warships for soda fell apart. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. Just like that, Pepsi lost its exclusive access. Coca-Cola rushed in. With faster logistics, massive ad campaigns, and the ability to pay in hard currency, Coke took over the new Russian market. Pepsi, despite its bizarre naval victory, lost the long game. They'd won the Cold War moment, but lost the Cola War. The story sounds absurd because, well, it is. But underneath the absurdity is a very real truth. In the late Cold War era, corporations were becoming more powerful than ever. Powerful enough to cut deals with nations, to move military assets, to influence culture across ideological borders. As you can see, Pepsi didn't just sell soda, they shaped global policy. And for one moment, they did what no military or politician could. They melted down tanks and stocked the shelves. That wasn't just business, it was a shift in how the world worked. Today, the biggest companies on Earth build rockets, run satellites, control global communication, and influence elections. So, maybe Pepsi owning a navy wasn't a glitch in the system. Maybe it was a preview. So yeah, once upon a time, Pepsi owned a navy, and while they didn't use it, they didn't need to. In the Cola Wars, victory didn't come from missiles, just better marketing.